A Tall and Small Collection, Season 2, Chapter 27. Worth the Wait. Aching, tired, ears ringing. It took a minute once he was awake for Soren to fully remember what happened yesterday. Images flashed before his eyes of the three borrowers whose faces were seared into his memory. The terrified expression on Ray's face as he reluctantly ran away with Maisie, and the warmth of Ashlyn's gentle touch bringing him back from the brink of death. Ashlyn. Soren felt himself smile involuntarily as the terrible recollection of the attack was replaced with Ashlyn's confession. Being woken up from the brink of death by the all-surrounding warmth of her hand and feeling the beat of her heart as he was pressed against her chest was enthralling. Her words played over and over. There was a small part of him that wondered if it was just a dream. He was in a strange stupor of being awake and asleep when it happened. No, it had to be real. He didn't imagine it. At the very least, he couldn't believe he imagined her kiss. Thoughtful, tender, soft, scared. This thought alone made his heart palpitate excitedly. Still, Ashlyn didn't know he heard her. She had probably felt a momentary swell of courage, thinking he was unconscious, letting her feel comfortable enough to confess her true feelings for him. Ultimately, this left the ball back in Soren's court. He needed to find the right time, if there was such a thing, to talk to her and admit he heard her. The topic was also a sensitive one. Soren had to admit he had the same thoughts and feelings as his human counterpart, but he had concerns as well. Again, he needed to admit he heard her. Would she be frustrated or angry that he heard her when he wasn't meant to? Would she be embarrassed and take back what she said? There had to be a reason she kept these feelings to herself, especially for so long. Soren wondered if she had the same doubts he did about being together, and whether these feelings were real or simply endearment for one another. They were different, yes, but could their feelings be strong enough? Soren believed the answer was yes. First, he had some things to take care of. By the time Soren forced his battered body upright, it was well past midday and approaching 2 in the afternoon. He tested his strength, muscles screaming in protest, by sliding down the fixed line from the bed to the ground and walking through the bedroom to the main living area where he heard sounds. Ashlyn had taken Maisie, Ray, and Dorian into the living room and put on a movie on her television. They apparently hadn't been there long since the movie just started. The three of them were cuddling on the coffee table in a mountain of blankets Ashlyn had set up for them. The boys' bandages had already been changed and tightened so they could maneuver easily, and a second breakfast for lunch spread was on the table with them. Everyone, including Ashlyn, was in the living room, and they were all beyond relieved to see Soren awake, but also surprised he was up and walking around so soon. No one blamed him, though. Soren wasn't the kind to lay in bed all day, even if he was feeling poorly. Soren, seeing Ashlyn approach, felt his heart jump into his throat and felt a pleasant, tinkling shiver as he stepped onto Ashlyn's hand so she could set him on the coffee table with the rest of them. Ah! Maisie cooed as she stumbled over the blankets into Soren's arms. He crouched and pulled her into his chest warmly. He hid a wince as his daughter's arms squeezed as hard as they could, even though it wasn't very strong, as her embrace pressed directly into a deep bruise he received from yesterday's attack. "Soren, you're up!" Ray cheered, raising his arm, which was braced with a soft cast into the air. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been battered and frozen," replied Soren as he stood, Maisie still in his arms with her legs dangling, and walked over to his brothers. Ashlyn had retreated to the kitchen to retrieve her medical kit and some painkillers. What he really wanted was a way to get this cold sensation out of his middle, but that would have to wait. "How are you two?" "We're all right," Dorian replied. "I mean, we're great all things considering, but still stunned, I guess." "Yeah," muttered Ray. Soren sat down, readjusting Maisie so she could sit in his lap, and stared at the soft casts on Ray's arm and Dorian's leg. "What exactly happened? You told me yesterday, I think," asked Soren. The boys nodded and went into their story again, explaining how Ray had just made it to the Rafters' home and was reunited with Dorian when they were stopped on the way back by 3 unfamiliar borrowers. Ray recognized them immediately, and he grabbed Dorian as they sprinted away. It was a risk, but Ray knew they had to take it when they were mere steps ahead of their attackers. Without knowing if his device would hold them both, the borrower boys took the chance of a lifetime and leapt off of the edge. All things considering, their injuries could have been worse, but it would be a while before they took any more leaps of faith, since Ray had to abandon some of his device pieces behind so they could get away. Soren's insides churned as he listened to his brother's story. To think he was incapacitated, recuperating from nearly freezing to death as his brothers were going through this. "Soren, why did they come after us?" asked Dorian. "Because they're good-for-nothing cowards," muttered Ashlyn as she finished cutting some additional bandages, which she had warmed before handing them to Soren. "Here, for your muscles." Soren's hand shook as he took them. His nerves were getting the better of him, being so close to her. He took a breath before looking up into those stormy blue-gray eyes he took so much comfort in. "Thank you," he said, smiling before his features fell. "And to your point, Dorian, I have my suspicions. What it boils down to is fear turned to anger." "Fear turned to anger?" asked Ray. "Yes, I think they found out about our family and Ashlyn," replied Soren. "You're kidding," moaned Ray as he rolled his eyes with such exaggeration that he fell backward onto the blanket. Maisie, seeing this as an excellent opportunity, pushed herself up from Soren's lap and toddled over to land on Ray's exposed middle. She giggled gleefully at Ray's "oof" before rearranging herself to sit with her uncle. "I know, it's not fair, but that's probably what it's about," stated Soren, while wrapping the warm rags around his bruises and sore muscles. "Like I said, cowards," muttered Ashlyn. "But that's all I'm going to say about that. Soren, how are you feeling? Any lightheaded sensations at all?" A zing went up Soren's spine hearing Ashlyn say his name, making him smile. Also, right at that moment, Soren felt his head swirl when he went to shake his head no. "A little, but I'll be fine," he replied. His chest was constricting. Why was he suddenly nervous speaking to her? More importantly, did she notice? "That's good. You just need to rest and leave your body alone to heal," chimed in Ray as he readjusted the soft cast on his arm yet again. "Take your own advice," muttered Dorian teasingly, calling out his younger brother. "Don't mess with your arm. I'm not messing with my leg." "It itches, and I can't write or work on my gadgets with it all banged up. I'm just trying to readjust it so I can be useful," retorted Ray. "We'll figure something out," encouraged Ashlyn. She retreated to the kitchen and came back a minute later with thimbles of warm tea with honey beside them. Maybe this would get rid of that cold feeling Soren felt in his core. "Anyway, do you need anything?" "Not at the moment. At least, not here," muttered Soren as he took several long drinks of tea before he pushed himself up onto his feet. He gave Maisie a quick kiss on the head and ruffled Ray's hair before heading for the edge of the coffee table. "I'll be back." Soren was almost there when Ashlyn's hand came into view, stopping him. "And where do you think you're going?" she asked expectantly. Soren, heart pounding, couldn't bring himself to look at Ashlyn in that moment. He needed time to think, and there were things he needed to address. "I have some things to take care of," stated Soren. The boys instantly looked alarmed at Soren's statement, and Ashlyn's hand inched closer to him until her index finger rested gently on the top of his shoe. It wasn't forceful, but it did keep Soren from walking forward. He could have walked around or tried to get loose, but he stood there instead. "The things you have to take care of should be yourself," said Ashlyn. "Does this have anything to do with what happened yesterday with those other borrowers? Because there is no way I'm letting you go, at least not on your own." "No, it's not that," said Soren. Why couldn't he turn to face her? Why was his heart pounding like this? He wasn't even talking about what she said to him last night. "I need to let the Rafters know what happened. If those three are in some kind of cahoots with the Rafters, or if they think the Rafters know, it could ruin them. I'm not having that happen on my watch. At the very least, they need to be warned." There were other things Soren needed to take care of, but he wasn't going to say anything about that now. He felt Ashlyn's eyes narrow skeptically at him, and, in an effort to ease her mind, Soren summoned his courage and looked up determinedly at Ashlyn, following the look with a smile. "I promise I'll be back soon. I'm just going to go there and come right back," stated Soren. While Ashlyn looked skeptical, her blue-gray eyes looking deep to gain some insight into his thoughts, she sighed and moved her hand. "Then I'm giving you the same contingency as I gave Ray yesterday. If you're not back in 30 minutes, I'm coming after you," she said firmly. Soren chuckled and shook his head. "I need at least an hour." "An hour? Out of the question," said Ashlyn. Soren thought she was serious when he saw her lips pull into a smile. "Unacceptable? Well, that's what you're going to get," teased Soren right back. He looked at Ashlyn and saw she was obviously uneasy, and without giving it a second thought, stepped over to her hand and laid his hand on the tip of her finger. "I promise I'll be back as fast as possible, okay?" There it was, Ashlyn's smile. It tugged the corners of her lips into a very hesitant grin. "You'd better," she said softly. With that, Soren let Ashlyn carry him over to their place in the walls that was easy to access and set him on his way. Once alone, Soren's mind kicked into his well-honed survival mode. He listened and crept through the walls, daring to peer into his overturned home. It wasn't the fact that many of their belongings were scattered about, or that the things they constructed had been partially deconstructed. It was the little things that were memories of their home and life before this apartment that were damaged or missing. There were little odds and ends like the bottle cap Ashlyn gave him when they first met that was missing. What felt like a real gut punch was the fact that Soren's father's hook was also missing. Rage boiled in his gut, but it didn't warm that untouchable spot in his chest and didn't help him get those things back. It would take time, but they would come back and fix this place they called home. Soren collected a few other odds and ends, including a spare hook and some lines for safety measures, and headed out along the beams and through the wires to the main hub by the elevator shaft. The day hub was eerily quiet. Was it the time of day? Or had word spread that Soren and his family were friends with a human, and everyone was frantically packing to migrate? If he were being honest with himself, Soren didn't care. At the moment, his goals were simple. talk to the rafters and talk to Bay. His muscles protested with every movement, but he continued walking until Soren finally arrived at the rafters' front door. There wasn't even the slightest hesitation as he raised his hand and knocked on the door. A few moments passed when the door creaked open and Hero, the youngest boy, peeked his head out. He smiled the moment he saw Soren, but his expression changed to confusion when he spotted the deep bruises on Soren's face. "Hello, Soren? Is everything okay?" Hero asked, pulling the door open wider. "It will be. Is your father home?" asked Soren. Yeah, he's sharpening hooks," said Hero. He let Soren into the home and scurried over to a nearby door and knocked. "Dad, Soren is here to see you." Casper Rafters emerged from the back room, hook and sharpening rod in hand, and nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Hero," said Casper, who went to say something to Soren, but immediately silenced himself as he noticed Soren's injuries. It was obvious to the older brother that Casper was surprised and that his reaction was genuine. "What happened?" "Could we talk in private?" asked Soren. "It won't take long." Casper nodded without hesitation, and Soren followed him into the back into a kind of workshop filled with hooks, lines, and spare parts made of borrowed odds and ends. The moment the workshop door was closed, Casper gestured for Soren to continue. Soren, heart pounding in conviction, exhaled slowly before looking Casper in the eye. "We were attacked," stated Soren. Casper's eyes went wide, entire body visibly stiffening. "The human?" "No, absolutely not," said Soren firmly, bristling at the thought. "We were attacked by 3 of our own, borrowers." Casper appeared completely blindsided. His entire being slumped as he rested his chin on his thumb and index finger and leaned his head heavily into it. "I know how it sounds, but I wanted to come and let you know what happened." Soren explained that the 3 borrowers ambushed him and went after Dorian, Ray, and even Maisie. Soren also explained that he was shoved into the freezer to be left for dead, and that it was Ashlyn who had come in the nick of time to save his life. When asked what their motive was, Soren had his answer already. They found out we were friends with Ashlyn, and they let their fear get the better of them. I don't know what would have happened if she didn't come back in time, and I don't know who they are," said Soren. He took a shaky breath before continuing. "One thing I do know is I have to look after my family." Casper's expression shifted from concerned to quizzical, so Soren continued. "I'm thinking we're going to be staying with Ashlyn more and pulling back from the community, and unless someone asks us, I don't think we'll be volunteering our aid, since that's what got us targeted in the first place. So, if you need something, you'll know where to find us," said Soren. "Soren, you don't have to remove yourself from the community. Oh, we can..." "Casper, with all due respect, I think it would be a good solution for the time being. At the very least, we need to find out who these borrowers are before moving back into our home," said Soren. "Just thank you for all you've done for us. Really, you've been wonderful, and our doors are always open if you need help or want to stop by." Casper nodded and sighed. "You're a good man. I respect what you're willing to do for your family, and you're very brave for going to whatever lengths to keep them safe," he stated. "Same policy to you. If you need anything, our doors are always open." "Really?" "I have to say, I'm a little surprised, especially with Ashlyn," said Soren. Casper, tense, exhaled and nodded. I've got to say the same, but when we saw you and your family interact with Ashlyn, and though I can't understand it, I can respect it. With that, the two stood and shook hands. Soren slipped out of the rafters of his home, smiling at Hero before leaving, and headed out to tackle the next big thing on his list today. It took a little bit of time, but wandering through the halls and rafters eventually led Soren to a slightly ajar piece of trim and a female figure hoisting herself up into the ceiling. Sure enough, it was Bae. She looked like she had just come back from a borrowing trip. Soren smiled to himself, but also felt a pang. Bae was a good person, and there was no doubt they would be a good match for one another, just like Lucy had been. Soren loved Lucy with all his heart, as he loved Ray and Dorian and Maisie. Still, what he felt for Bae wasn't the same as what he knew he felt for Ashlyn. That silent debate crept into his mind again. Was he making the right decision? Would what he felt be enough? How would Bae take it? Bae, he called out. The daredevil borrower turned, a smile spread onto her face as she spotted Soren. Well, hi, handsome, Bae greeted as she stepped up to Soren. She was obviously moving in for a kiss, but hesitated not only when Soren took a half step back, but also when her hip lamp showed the bruises on his body. Gosh, what happened to you? It's not important right now. I just wanted to come talk to you, said Soren. Sure thing, but I don't get why those bruises aren't important right now, cried Bae. You sure you're okay? Yeah, I'm good, but there's something I need to do first, replied Soren. Could we take a walk? Bae bit her lip and folded her arms across her chest. Soren knew already by the stance she took that she knew what was happening. Without missing a beat, she asked, Who is she? Soren shifted uncomfortably and smiled. She's a good person, just like you. It's just, I care about you. But what I feel for her's different, said Soren quietly. I wish things were different. Same, she smiled. Really though, we could have something going. Don't go changing your mind now. Bae gave a sassy wink, and as she walked past Soren, gave him a little love tap on his backside. Soren wasn't sure how long he stood there. He wasn't even sure how he made it back to his home. All he knew was he was way past when he was supposed to be back, but he had some idea of how to make it up to her. Ashlyn's leg bounced nervously. Soren had been gone for nearly 3 hours. 3. She was going to kill him. At the very least, she was going to verbally annihilate him. If it weren't for Maisie wanting to play and Ray needing assistance making his new hook launcher 2.0 and Dorian working on some song lyrics, Ashlyn would be busting down walls. She also knew that she needed to keep the boys and Maisie safe. There would be nothing worse than if she went to go look for Soren and those 3 borrowers came back to finish what they started. Still, it was nerve-wracking. Soren was still injured. He could take care of himself, yes, but even he wouldn't take this long to just run a quick errand, right? Her mind started spiraling when she heard Ray's voice, which snapped her out of her inner monologue. What was that? Sorry, I phased out there for a second, she asked, rubbing her eyes with the heel of her palm. I asked if you were worried about him, said Ray, as he, for the 100th time, began messing with the bandage on his arm. It was completely involuntary, but Ashlyn reached up and set her hand beside the teenage borrower and scooted her finger against his leg. Yeah, I am. He was acting a little off when he woke up, At least I think he was acting a little off. I'm sure he's fine, but I'm worried too," interrupted Ray. Ashlyn stared at Ray, catching his pale blue eyes as he looked up at her and flashed a brief smile. "I don't think I've been this worried or scared in a long time, but Soren is strong, just like you're strong, and, well, I don't know about Dorian." "I know you're not talking about me," muttered Dorian passively as he chewed on the end of the plastic pencil tip Ashlyn gave him as he wrote down a few more lyrics. "Just a tease," grinned Ray, before looking back up at Ashlyn. "Soren will be back. It's okay, Ashlyn. He always comes back." "Always comes back from what?" Ashlyn's entire body relaxed from the tension she felt when she heard Soren's voice come up from the side of the coffee table. It took every impulse in her body not to pick him up and hold him close out of sheer relief. Instead, she set her hand on the ground and let him climb on before setting him down on the coffee table with the others. "Soren, welcome back," called Ray. "Your ears must have been burning. We were talking about you always coming back," said Ashlyn. Her heart pounded furiously in her chest, making her cheeks feel hot with embarrassment. "Of course," stated Soren. "I'll always come back." "Speaking of which," prompted Ashlyn, "where have you been? These rascals have been running me ragged." "Aha, yeah, right. Maisie fell asleep during the last movie, and we've been working quietly," said Dorian. "Good to know you spent your time wisely," grinned Soren as he stepped over and ruffled Dorian's hair, making him cringe and playfully slap his brother on the leg. Soren turned back and looked up at Ashlyn. "I'm sorry I'm late. I had a lot on my mind." "Oh? Things not go well with your errands?" asked Ashlyn. "Things went well, but..." Soren hesitated, glancing at his brothers before looking back up at Ashlyn. Could we talk in private?" Ashlyn felt her insides clench. "Talk? In private? What did that mean?" Sure, if you think it's important, we can go to the back bedroom and..." "Actually, can we go to the roof?" asked Soren. "The roof? Soren, that's a public spot, are you sure?" asked Ashlyn. Even Ray and Dorian glanced over at Soren. "Yes, I'm afraid there might be prying ears here." "We won't listen in," interjected Ray, at which Soren grinned. "Right, I'll take your word for it. Actually, I'm more worried about the other residents here in the building, if I'm being honest." "Please?" There was something in the way Soren spoke that didn't seem quite like him. It made Ashlyn uneasy. Still, if it was important to Soren, Ashlyn knew it needed to be important to her too. "Sure. Do you think they'll be okay on their own?" she asked, glancing at the boys and Maisie sleeping nearby. "Don't worry, Ashlyn. We can handle those rascals if they come back. We've got the home court advantage," chimed in Ray. "And we won't be gone long. I just wanted to talk to you about something," said Soren. Ashlyn hated this. An acidic taste rose up in the back of her throat. Everything about this made her uneasy, but she nodded and set her hand down on the table. "Let's go then. Boys, we'll be back soon. Think about what you want for dinner, okay?" "Got it," affirmed Ray, with a casted thumbs up. "Tacos for sure," muttered Dorian as he continued writing. With that, Soren stepped onto Ashlyn's hand, and she headed for the door. She was wearing a light jacket, and, after Soren gave the go-ahead, she slipped her hand into her pocket with him inside. Ashlyn locked the door behind her and made her way to the elevator, walking carefully the entire way. The elevator was on her floor, and it was on the ride up that she noticed that Soren's body was shaking. What was going on with him today? Did he hit his head? Was he worried about his family? It was now that Ashlyn felt like she had been punched in the gut. No. Were they leaving? Was that what he wanted to talk to her about? It made sense. This was the same kind of conversation they had when Ashlyn went to move away, when she left them behind. Was that happening now? Were they going to a different place in the building to distance themselves from her, so they weren't attacked again? The elevator doors opening made her jump, and she briskly walked out onto the roof and into the small greenhouse. The sun was setting and reflected gorgeous beams of gold across the sky from the nearby buildings. Heart starting to pound nervously and body trembling, Ashlyn checked the inside of the small greenhouse before pulling her hand out of her pocket, Soren crouching on her palm. Seeing him and anticipating the heaviness of the conversation made her chest tight, throat constricting with each breath. All she could think was the same thing over and over. Please, don't leave me again. Don't let me leave you. Don't make me leave you. Soren gestured to a shelf that was just about eye level, so Ashlyn set him down there. There were several potted plants which, by comparison, were about as tall as Soren. There was no doubt in her mind that he felt her hand trembling the whole way. Still, she tried to remain calm. What if this was about nothing? Ashlyn, I went and talked to the rafters, as you know, said Soren. He sounded just as tense as Ashlyn felt. Rafters, they're the main family, right? She asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Soren nodded. Now she knew this had to be about the family relocating. They were surprised at what happened, but Casper agreed with my decision, said Soren. Ashlyn could see it in his face. There was something going on in his mind that she would have no sway over. He had made up his mind about something, and she knew she wasn't going to like it. Decision? Soren, I thought you were just going to talk to them and let them know what happened, said Ashlyn, mind scrambling, thinking of something to say. Soren nodded stiffly. His palms felt sweaty. Every part of him vibrated with energy. He remembered a sensation like this once before, like when he first met Ashlyn. However, this was 1,000 times amplified. I did just go and talk to them, but I decided something too, said Soren. Ashlyn bit her lower lip, as she had to stop him. She had to say something, anything. Soren, wait, before you do anything reckless, maybe you all should just take some time. Get better, don't make any decisions rashly or I heard you, said Soren suddenly. He couldn't face her. His emotions were running wild, and the only way he was going to say anything was if he turned away. Soren swiftly turned his back. He was shaking like an autumn leaf in a windstorm. Ashlyn, confused, instinctually cocked her head to the side. She felt momentarily blindsided. Heard me? What are you... Ashlyn, like a punch in the gut, suddenly realized what Soren was hinting at. The color drained from her face. Time stood still. Every part of her felt adrift, lost at sea. You mean the other night? She asked. Soren, with his back still turned, nodded. He wasn't looking at her. He was shaking too. So, this wasn't about them moving. This was worse. This was about her feelings, about her confession. He heard her? You heard me? Every word. You must have been dreaming, said Ashlyn, trying desperately to explain away the words. Soren simply shook his head. Ashlyn, I didn't dream your kiss. Ashlyn's hands covered her mouth, stormy blue-gray eyes wide as saucers. She took an involuntary step backward. Emotions in a free fall. She was beyond mortified. Panicked, Ashlyn desperately tried to think of something, anything, to say to make it better. Soren, please, I can explain, said Ashlyn. It was the way Soren held himself that told her he would see through any fib or alternative thing to say. His back was still toward her. Even from this distance, she could see him shaking harder, his arms wrapped around his torso. Tears welled up in Ashlyn's eyes. So, they were leaving. It was because of what she said. No, please no. And it hit her. If this was really going to be goodbye, she needed to come out with it. Everything. There was no way around it. She took a breath. Fine. I'll come clean. You want the truth? Here it is, said Ashlyn. She was barely holding it together as her throat continued to constrain. Every ounce of her grappled with the emotions welling up in her heart. Her heart could not have been pounding harder or faster than in this very moment. I missed you when we were apart. Maybe more than I should have. I don't know when or how. I don't even know if it makes any sense, but I'm in love with you. Ashlyn watched as Soren kept his back to her, arms still wrapped around his torso, still shaking. What was going on in his head? Was this happening? Like a Jenga tower, everything felt like it was balanced one moment and collapsing the next. I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid, okay? Yeah, I get scared too. I was scared of messing up our friendship because I wanted something more. I know you, and didn't want it to seem weird or like I was trying to intrude into your life. It's just, I've never felt more at home than when I was with you. And Dorian and Ray and Maisie. You're my guy. You saved me and helped me be a better person, better than I deserve. You're funny and caring and bold. You helped me be a part of a family, and I didn't want to ruin it by being selfish, stammered Ashlyn. Every word spilled out after the next. She bit the inside of her cheek, now shaking and fighting back tears. Soren, please, don't leave. I swear, I'll never do anything to hurt you or the family. I just want us to stay together. I never said anything before because I was terrified you wouldn't feel the same because we're so different. But are we really? Soren's arms lifted to cover his face. He was shaking his head. She was losing him. Ashlyn stepped up to the shelf and carefully placed her fingertips on the edge of the shelf by him. Soren, please. I don't know what else to say. I'd never force you into anything you didn't want. I know what I feel, and that's all. I know I love you. Please, say something. Ashlyn waited several seconds in pure silence as tears streamed down her cheeks. Wincing at the pain in her heart, she lowered her forehead and pressed it against the shelf Soren was standing on. That's when she heard it. A chuckle. A laugh. Then, it's about time. Ashlyn looked up just in time to see Soren turn, a smile on his face and his hazel eyes glossy with tears of his own. He stepped up to her before she could pull away in surprise, and, without hesitation, he kissed her on the forehead. Ashlyn, stunned at Soren's sudden advance, felt her entire body convulse. Her heart felt like it was about to explode with joy. Her right hand came up and pressed against his back, pulling him closer. Impulsively, she pulled away and pressed her lips against his torso, kissing him back. All this time later, it was worth the wait. as Ashlyn pulled away from their kiss, Soren leaning against her fingers. They knew something had begun, but now they would face it together.